All right, we're here with Vidya Dinamani. Vidya, thanks so much for joining us today. Really excited about this.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
So I know, where are you based, by the way? I didn't ask.
I'm in California. I'm in San Diego, which usually
Okay.
I say sunny, but it's kind of pretty drab today.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't feel bad for you. I'm sure you get more, you get a ton of excellent weather out there. But yeah, I know you've had a bunch of exciting roles in product, done some cool stuff in the product space. We're both passionate about product, so this will be a fun conversation. Maybe just to set some context, give folks an idea of how you got involved in all this and some of the work you've been doing.
Absolutely. So for the last 6 years, I've been a product coach. And so working with lots and lots of different companies, right from startups all the way to Fortune 50 household names. But I started my career as a software engineer. So I'm a geek and happy and proud to be one. Went from there after going into the business, getting my MBA, then started moving into operations, into strategy. And then I spent 10 years at Intuit, which sounds like a really long time. But I had multiple different roles, had such a blast, amazing company, really where I think learned my product chops, and spent 5 years running customer experience for TurboTax. And from there, went on to lead product at various different B2B, was chief product officer. And now for the last 6 years, I've been a product coach. So lots and lots of different experience in product.
Okay, usually the kind of intro sets up one or two things to jump into. With you, I feel like there's 9 different things immediately that I could glom onto with that, because that's a really impressive background and an exciting sort of tour of different experiences you've had. But maybe we'll start with product coach. Tell me more about what that is and what kind of work that is, because that might be something that a lot of folks aren't familiar with.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So we differentiate product coach from product training, because I think a lot of people train and you get a curriculum and you learn that curriculum a lot of the time to learn how to be a product manager or various different aspects. And for us, we differentiate it and we call ourselves a coach, because we don't have a way of just saying, this is how you do something. We really partner with the company, we partner with the product leader, and we talk about how to bring a customer mindset or a product-led centricity into the organization. And there's certain key aspects, and it's all based on who you are, what company, what industry, the type of products that you have, the type of size of team. It's every company is completely different. So training isn't a one size, and that's why we call it coaching, because we want to make you help people become better at making better products. And for that, you really need to understand the entire 360 view of the situation that they're in. So that's what a product coach is.
Okay, so you'll go in and basically work with the existing product team that's in that company.
Yeah. And the first thing is to learn what they're facing. There are, there's about 7 patterns that we've come across, and all the way from it's really hard to make decisions last. It's hard. Your product backlog is kind of out of control. It's hard to innovate. There's some patterns that we see. And so, we come in, but we have to understand the context. We have to understand, what the background is, what the business goals and objectives need to be. And with that, we sit down, we work with the product team, and we have a methodology, but it really is so important to understand with the team and the people within the organization, what they're dealing with. And then we've worked with over 200 companies at this point. So we can bring a ton of experience, a ton of pattern recognition into this and go, okay, let's bring some best practices and let's talk about your situation, because we know this works because we've done it before in a very similar environment.
This is super, super interesting. And I want to maybe dig in a little more on this whole discovery phase that you guys do here, because I think working with a coach or not, there's probably a lot of value for other product teams and knowing how to kind of uncover some of this. When you really tactically, like, you get into an organization and you're, like you say, trying to dig into what are the problems, what are the issues, what's the kind of whole landscape look like? I mean, tactically, like what are the kind of questions you ask, metrics you're looking for? Like what kind of rocks are you pulling back to start to figure out some of this?
Such a great question. And it's almost like a meta conversation, right? Because we do this with our teams, and I sense you're going to, this is a lot of the way that we do product discovery when we're trying to uncover, specific important customer problems. So when we go in, one of the first things we talk about is how successful are the products? So we talk about, are we delivering on outcomes? We take a look at the business objectives and we see what's in place in order for us to know whether we're successful or not. So one key aspect is business outcomes versus output, because a lot of the time teams, especially in this world of agile or safe, we know how to do process, right? We know how to deliver software. You can put together a backlog and your development team will absolutely execute on that backlog. But is it the right thing? Is it delivering the business outcomes that we need to? So that's the first one. The second one is about customer. Like how close is the product team to the customer? And I know that sounds really obvious, but gosh, so many times we come in and the product team is sheltered, is a word that we often hear. They don't get in front of the customer, especially in B2B. It's harder. A lot of the sales account teams are very protective of that relationship, and it is difficult. And so we have ways that we can talk about how we get in there and get the customers face to face with a product team that's making some really key decisions. So that's really the second. What kind of customer information? How close are they? What kind of customer listening posts are there? Do they have a customer advisory? How often do they engage with customer? Where does customer data come in and feature as part of their decision making? So there's a second piece of this, which is really around sort of the understanding and the connection to their core customer. And I will say for B2B, just as an aside, it's both. It's both your user as well as, it might be multiple. You might have an influencer, you might have a buyer. So it really is, how well do you understand that whole ecosystem? And then the third is internally. Is the product team influential? Are those decisions sticking? Are they connected? And do they have an ability to persuade different stakeholders? Or are those decisions being overturned? And that really looks like churn. It looks like churn in your product roadmap. It looks like churn in your backlog. It looks like decisions being overturned or new ideas coming in, because there really isn't the belief that the product team are the experts in making these decisions. So other people make those decisions. So those are the three sort of key areas that we really dive into. And then a bunch of different questions come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. My mind is blown right now. There's so many different directions to take this. I love this conversation. And I love the emphasis on how close, the second one you mentioned, how close the product team is to customers. I think that's especially, you kind of flagged there, like larger organizations, things maybe get a little more bureaucratic or territorial with different customer facing roles in the mix. Are there any common, because I've talked to a bunch of product teams who struggle with this. Are there any common sort of plays that product folks can run or techniques they can use to kind of turn things around if they feel like their ship's not on course in terms of like closeness with the customer?
Yeah. And I'll start with the most extreme, which is product teams who've never talked to a customer. It's always secondhand. It's always coming from either an executive team, or it's coming from the sales organization, the account management organization. And so everything they get is secondhand. So in that case, there's a couple of tips. One is to ask to tag along. And a lot of the time, again, when that's very protective, you have to build a relationship. You have to build some credibility. And you also have to promise that you won't say a thing. And I've literally done this. So you tag along and go, I literally will be a fly on the wall. I just want to be able to come and see and look at the dynamic. And then after that, put a report together, do a debrief, talk about the insights, talk about the questions that you might have asked, talk about what this means. And so you have to do some extra work. It's definitely a lift. But when you start proving your worth, and you will, just by tagging along to a couple of meetings, you're going to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
You're there to serve the customer need. And so you're listening for what those problems are. And so that by doing that, you build some credibility. So the first is to see if you can tag along. If that's not possible, start gathering every piece of customer data that you can find. Customer feedback, go to customer service and support, your best friend. Hang out with the sales team, listen to all the anecdotes. And then with that, again, it's secondhand, but instead of being an order taker and saying, go do this, you're actually doing research with all the different pieces. You bring in competitor research, market research. You start building a case for the kinds, again, the research that you would want to conduct, and you start building credibility that you really are serious. You have done the legwork. You are looking for all this data. You're making hypotheses. You're extrapolating from the information that you have. And then people are like, well, gosh, we really need to get this person in front of the customer so they can actually find out more. Because again, you're serving the customer. So those are a couple of tips on the extreme.
That's outstanding. And I love that. I love the emphasis on research and gathering data. And I think that there's this temptation to treat every research endeavor or like fact-finding mission as like, we need to go get net new data. We need to do a new survey. We need to do this new kind of qualitative research project, whatever it looks like. And yeah, of course there's value in all that, but often overlooked is like the troves of primary source material that's already at your fingertips that already exists. It's just a matter of kind of collecting it, curating it, analyzing it, spinning out insights and recommendations and all of that. And a lot of folks, they jump to, we got to have new conversations and send another survey and instrument another tool and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, have you really even tapped into the treasure trove of data that you have already?
That's exactly right. And I love that you emphasize that, because it often is so much. And in the search for, it's got to be like my primary research, there is so much data available. And there's one other thing that I'll say, and this again is a very easy thing to do, is treat your sales team, your front-facing customer group, as your proxy, and go do the research. Because again, what you'll find is the kind of questions that you have, they'll probably know the answer to some of them, but they're not going to know the answer to everything. And again, this is showing why and how giving you access in these ways allows the business to move forward. So I've done that as well. The proxy team, especially when you pull all the data, so 2 and 3 sort of go hand in hand. You've done this research, you've culled all the data that you have, and then you say, but wait a second, do we know about this? This piece of data seems to be missing. Can you help me learn about this? And you'll find that often it doesn't exist, which gives you the open door to start. Once you get that foot in the door, keep going. But it's all about, I think, in those extreme situations, getting your foot in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Great insight and advice. And also, I love the tag along. I've done the tag along a bunch with like a sales call, and it's great because you sort of set it up as fly on the wall, but it's like half the time I've found the sales rep on the call ends up sort of like calling on you or leaning on you for a question anyway, or kind of kicking the conversation over to you, voluntarily. So you end up being part of it, even if you didn't intend to. But it's a great thing to do for all sorts of folks, anyone close to the customer, for sure. I'd like to jump to, you mentioned, I'm really interested in this because you mentioned, we've worked with like 200 plus product teams, and there are these sort of like meta problems, these like patterns you've noticed. I think you might have said there's like 6 or 7 that kind of come up over and over again. Can you expound on that? Can you name a few of those, or like let us tell, like, so I think a lot of product teams are out there like, oh, I'm the only one having this problem, but there's what are the common problems that you see the most showing up over and over?
Yeah, and I will link this if that's okay to what we do about it, because in seeing these patterns, we've said, and really this is kind of how we come in with our methodology, which is called groundwork. And just a tiny little bit of background on this, I said we started off with training and coaching. It was much more broad. It was much more around all the different aspects of product management, whether that was, roadmaps or strategy, or even to the detail of user stories. We used to kind of run the gamut and sort of help with everything. And because of these patterns, what we found is it was the same root cause. Again, I think this is a little bit of a meta conversation, but we applied our own analysis, our own insight gathering, and said, what's going on that people experience these symptoms over and over? And some of the symptoms are around, as I said before, decisions don't stick. You get arguments. You feel like you've got commitment in a meeting. You felt like you've got the sign off, and then you turn around the next week and it's changed again. Your backlogs are exploding. There's way too many priorities, and then new ideas are just coming from everywhere. And you kind of feel like you're buffeted, right? By kind of this constant influx of, we should do this, we should do that. So these kinds of things, why are they happening? Like, why are product teams struggling? Why are you losing credibility with your development team? Because they're like, oh, here we go again, right? We're not supposed to change, but here we go.
Yeah.
And it can often feel like you're stuck in the middle, and it's really hard. And you're working a lot. Product managers, it's one of the hardest. I mean, it's also the most fun job out there, but it's one of the hardest jobs. There's a lot of people to work with. There's a lot of people to connect. There's a lot of steps in order to get to a successful product launch. So we started looking at what was going on, and what we came up with is there's 3 key areas. One is that people aren't focusing on the right problem to solve. There's lots and lots of problems that customers will express. There's lots of problems that your internal teams will tell you. And there's no shortage. And this is why we have such big backlogs. We have roadmaps that could last for decades. But how do you find the right problem? How do you narrow in and select the most important problem to solve? So for us, it starts there. And when we ask people, we ask teams, like, are you solving the same problem? Even within a team, we have this fun exercise. It's fun for us. It's probably not so fun for the poor team. But we say to everybody, write down the problem that you think you're solving. And invariably, everyone writes a slightly different problem. There's one case where we were actually talking to 2 founders. This was a team that was growing. They were starting to get their Series A funding, and they were arguing about the use of funds. So we were coaching them. And we made them do this. We had the 2 co-founders write down, and we have a more complicated template, but we made them write down every piece of the problem that they were going to solve. And then we had them swap. We're like, okay, read each other's problem statements. They were solving 2 completely different problems. So when you do that, of course, you can't agree. You can't agree on the direction. You can't agree on how much money. You can't agree on resources. You can't agree on marketing because fundamentally you hasn't expressed and articulated and shared and come to alignment with the exact problem. So that's the first area. We really want people to understand. And part of this is picking. A product manager's job at the end of the day, and I think we've heard this a lot, you say no to most things, but what you say yes to is the most important. And so you need to be absolutely sure that this is the most important problem to solve, to test it, to run a bunch of hypotheses, to go in front of your customers, to prototype your way into this, all the good development practices, but it's got to start with clarity. And you never start with one problem. You always start with many, and you've got to find which problem. So we call it the convergent problem statement. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but for us, it really starts with you've got to start broad, and then you've got to bring your team together and pick. So that's the first area. So should I keep going, Blake? Because there's 2 more.
Let's do it. I want to hear the other 2.
Okay. So the second one then is this understanding of your customer. And a lot of people come up, we call it an actionable persona. And the reason for that is, persona for a start gets such a bad rap. People roll their eyes.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it's because I think so much of the time a persona has been outsourced. A lot of the bigger companies have beautiful marketing displays of what they believe their persona to be. But it's just shiny, and no one pays any attention to it. So our goal is to articulate the persona in such a way that you can send it to everybody. You can send it to your development team. We've done this with remote development teams where we shared our persona. They get so excited because the depth of understanding psychographics, understanding attitudes and beliefs, bringing that customer to life around the problem space. So this isn't a generic demographic. This person is, 30 to 35, they like ice cream. I mean, it's like, who cares? It really is around the problem space. And when you do that, when you create an actionable persona that's around your problem space, you can use it to make decisions. You can also use it to have really good discussions with stakeholders. So when they argue with you or they want to overturn, they go, let's go back to our customer. What would our customer do? And we don't know, let's go find out. Let's go talk to our customers, let's research. So this actionable persona that's built on interviews, on observation, on true understanding allows you to make business decisions that aren't overturned. So fundamentally, those two pieces, the problem and the persona, they go hand in hand, which leads me to the third, and I promise this will be briefer. But companies never, unless you're a startup and you have one problem and you're going after it, most companies have lots of problems and they have lots of customer segments. This is complicated. We live in a complicated world. What we find, and this is one of the symptoms we were talking about, is people munge together the problems and the persona because they want to try and build software that works for everybody, right? It's efficiency. It's, well, I've heard this need sort of across these multiple different people. So I'm going to prioritize that because if I do that, then gosh, lots more people will buy this. But what happens? Nobody buys it because it doesn't actually deeply need any sort of one of those segment needs. So our third area is to essentially pair up. You've got to pair up your problem and your persona. And when you line them up, and we call it individualized needs, then you start making trade-offs. You can say, for example, we're going to solve for this customer first in this particular way that will lead to delight because we truly understand them and we're focused. Now, other segments may also look at that and want that product. And that's great, we'll grow, but you get product market fit when you deeply solve a problem for a customer and they're willing to pay for that problem to be solved. And the only way you can do that is through this individualized needs where you're not then, painting with you're not spreading thin, you're not kind of rushing across multiple customers. You have to pick. So those three components are our answer to all the root cause problems that we saw. Sorry, that was a lot of information.
No, that is a masterclass on fundamental issues that all product teams should be focusing on. So I love that. Again, I almost don't know where to start, but yeah, quick aside on the big plus one on the personas. I have been on such the receiving end, and I'll own up to it too. Probably been on the creating end of some terrible customer personas, and now it's like I can tell at a glance. Like, have you spent enough time with the customer, the organizations, to understand these people? It's like when you've been through it enough, like you can see it right away. It's like this was outsourced or based on like very cursory understanding of who these folks are. Another tip or like a thing I've been really impressed with, you mentioned the sort of like the familiarity the sales team in a B2B environment can have with the customer and watching a great account executive and salesperson understand not just the person they're selling to, but like the dynamics of that organization and the different people. And there's this person, he's going to be our champion and he cares about this, but their manager is so-and-so and she cares about this. And this person in security is going to have to hear X, Y, and Z. Like great sales folks, like have such a holistic understanding of the organization and the different motivations. And I would definitely recommend, if you have the opportunity, spend some time with folks like that, because they're masters at knowing the dynamics and different people. But I love the focus on just base that on, really knowing the people. Like if you have a flat understanding, you need to go out, do more of that research. That's 100% resonates. I'd love to ask about, you talk a lot about problem statements. I'm sure you've heard I'm sure you've heard quite the range of really, really poor problem statements and really, really good problem statements. And I think that's like one of those things where people don't know what a great problem statement looks like, or even like you said, writing out the problem, what the sort of anatomy of a good version of that actually is. Anything you can share on like what a good problem statement actually looks like, or what you've seen at least?
Yeah, a couple of tips. And people can go to our site and download a template for free. You can get the actual template and do this for yourself. And then
awesome.
I highly recommend it as an exercise.
We'll link to that for sure.
Grab it. So a couple of things is, one, it can't have symptoms or features in it. One of the worst things that you can do for a problem statement is justify the existence of your product or your feature. And so that circular logic we find a lot. My problem exists because the customer has this problem. It's like, no. Your problem's got to exist for your customer. If your product or feature or service never existed, they still have to experience this. And so you need to capture that. So that's one of the things that we look for. The other thing we look for is the why. It's why is this happening? What's the root cause of this? And for that, again, and it goes back to what you just said about understanding the customer, you've really got to have this deep understanding, because a lot of the time we can see the problem and we immediately, it's just humans, and especially I think as product managers, we like solving problems. It's one of those things that it's one of those characteristics that every product manager has. We like solving problems. We like building things and seeing this out in the world. And so often we're very quick to jump to, I see this problem. Here's what we're going to do about this. This is the fix. And so you have to stop. You've got to pause, and you've got to write down perhaps some hypotheses. This is a great way to start. Put down what you believe to be true and why you think this problem is, and then go test it. Go learn, and then come back. And if you're right, fantastic, keep going. But often you'll find that it leads you to more questions, and then perhaps a different root cause, which will lead you in a different direction as you think about, again, prototyping, going broad with thinking about solutions. So those two pieces, I think, are probably the most important. We have other characteristics. We like to characterize what's happening in the problem, how they're feeling about it, which I know is an odd thing to capture in a problem statement. But when you understand the emotion, when you understand what is it leading to, how are people feeling about this, it's a really great way to kick off ideation for solutions. And it's so helpful when you share this with others, especially if you're in a big company and there's marketing and branding and so forth and PR. Understanding what your customer is going through is such a great way of talking about how the solution is going to make them feel when they overcome this problem. But again, there's several more features that you can grab from our template.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, we'll be sure to link to that. Folks can check that out and find that. Sounds super helpful. So I'm going to check that out myself. I did want to ask a little bit, two things that have come up. I know you mentioned sort of exploding backlogs a couple times, and I think sort of related to that is another thing that product teams see sort of growing out of control is like customer feedback and requests and feature requests and sort of feedback triaging. Like those seem to be the two kind of like, they might be in one place, they might be separate, but like if something's going to be like kind of growing like a weed that feels like it's like suffocating everything and you don't know where to start, it's going to be like my backlog and also this, giant collection of feedback that's coming in, and how do I sort through that? You talked about some of the fundamental sort of root causes of that. Any sort of tips or approaches for folks who are like trying to get those things under control?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk about the exploding backlog first. I remember coming into an organization and they had it was over 1,000. It was over 1,000 items in their backlog. And
For sure.
their velocity was such that they probably got through about 12 to 15 a quarter. So
Right.
this was never going to happen. And so
Yeah. And
part of this,
spoiler alert, way more than 12 to 15 a quarter showing up new. So you have to be a math genius to sort of figure out how that ends up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that image, right? It's that image of the
Right.
bathtub that's just like, overflowing, and you just can't like do anything with this.
Yeah.
And so what we often do is like, we start with the problem. We're like, okay, let's just get clear. And if you start at the highest level, which is your business objectives, what is the business strategy? A product manager has to know this backwards. You've got to know what the business is trying to do. And you've got to align everything that you do against those. It instantly gives you credibility. You speak about the business strategy as you're making these decisions. You're instantly aligned with everyone else in the organization, because that's what we're all there to do. So the first thing is to take a look and then to develop key problem statements around these different areas. So what we're trying to do is build a matrix of, here's what's important to the business, and here are the groups of problems that we're solving. Once you've done that, you're sorting through, and this takes a little bit of time, especially if you've got 1,000 plus. I remember it took us probably like 6 or 7 weeks. We just went through a couple of hundred every single day. We sat down as a team. We just did it. But what you end up with is discarding 95% of them, because the key pieces that both fit with the business strategy, perhaps it's all about retention. So anything that is then coming up with completely new features that have got nothing to do with existing customers, it's all about new. This is a bit of an extreme example, but I just want to show you that if half your backlog is about how am I going to get the next market segment, but your entire business strategy is about retention, there's no point in looking at those. So this is why we want to first align to the business strategy, and then we want to align and group into problems. And then within those problem sets, you can find out what the most important problem is, look at all the different features, solutions, ideas that you have, and then start to actually trade off and cull them. That process is enormously helpful in shrinking your backlog significantly. What you also have is, going forward, you now have a framework. You have a way to think about the new ideas that you immediately, and you can just share this as well with the entire organization, that this is how things come into our backlog. So if it doesn't meet a business priority, if it's not the most important business customer problems that we're solving, then we're not looking at this right now. You might have a different place to capture them, but they're not in your backlog.
Yeah, it's that kind of confidence and comfort in your own identity and knowing like what you are and what you're here for and what the strategy is. And that kind of creates these natural barricades to like things getting, it's funny you say that. I'm reminded of like some restaurants you go to and the menu is like 30 pages long, and it's like, they've got hamburgers and sushi and it's just like everything. And you're not only are you sitting there like, do I really want to eat here? You can picture in the back office, their supplier probably just shows up and says like, we got cheesecake. And the poor restaurant owner says, I guess, put it on the menu. As opposed to if you're a place that's like, we do sushi. We know who we are. We know our business. We know our strategy. That person is not going to have this exploding backlog of like, maybe I should add this. Maybe we should consider that. Like they just show up and it's, no, that doesn't belong here because that's not what we're doing here.
I love that analogy because it's also, because you're speaking to customer trust as well. Because when you have a company that you're working with and they truly understand you and everything they're doing on their roadmap makes sense, it's so different from someone who might show you their roadmap. And that's when you get really unhappy customers, especially when you get to very large, when you get institutions, when you get, really sort of like big clients, and they push back. And the worst kind of case of this is then you're starting to build custom software. You're starting to sort of stream, pull off different, versions. And now you're supporting people very differently because they don't understand why you're doing half the things that you're going to do.
Yeah.
And then they bring out their big stick and they go, well, we're 30, 40, 50% of your revenue. We don't
Yeah.
want you to do that. And it's
Yeah.
really hard. I mean, product managers, get themselves into really tough positions because of a lack of focus. So I love the fact that that analogy. It's also sitting on the other end. If I went to a restaurant like that, I'm like, I don't think they do anything well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like I definitely don't want to try any of this. Like, I'm not, how long it's been that the fish has been in storage. So we'll see. This has been a killer conversation. I could talk about this stuff all day. Two maybe kind of quick ones before we wrap up. Anything, any kind of conventional wisdom out there in the product world that you'd push back on? Like, what is something that you think, folks are getting wrong, or that you just like might have a kind of contrarian point of view on?
Well, I think I'm not going to mention any specific ones, but I think it's tools. I think people feel like they've got to have a tool to do something. And there's a plethora of, roadmap, or you name it, how to organize, how to share information, how to present information. And people can get really wrapped up on it's this tool versus that tool. We often get asked, well, which tool do you recommend? I'm like, none. You don't need anything. You don't need anything to be a product manager. Go capture information and whatever makes sense, whatever's simple for you, whatever you like. The simpler, the better, because the whole goal is to be out there talking to customers, translating, being able to share that information, get buy-in to what you do, and then go build it. That's what we are there for, not to get ourselves wrapped up around tools. So I think that's the thing that I'm going to push against.
No, I love that. And as a vendor ourselves, building a tool for product managers, like, I won't even push back against that. I 100% agree with you. I've been, working at, software vendors for, PMs and product teams for, a handful of different companies now. And it's like, the people who show up with that perspective are usually the worst customers too.
Yes.
Like, they're the ones, they're going to churn. They're going to, have the wrong point of view. You might be pumped when they show up for the demo because they want your tool or whatever. They think this new tool, but it's the ones that think the tool itself is going to be a silver bullet, that they're going to have some honeymoon period, and then they're either going to churn or have a bad experience or be just like a drag on your support and success team and all of that, because they didn't have the sort of foundation of like what they're trying to do in place first. They thought a tool would be the answer.
It's so right on, because it's hard for you as well. And I think when you have a specific need and when the organization, when the organization needs to have information in a certain way, and I don't want to say all the tools, there's some really great tools out there. So I didn't mean to say that. I really was that attitude of, what's the tool versus what's the need? And once you understand that need, then go figure it out and just keep it simple until then. And for the vendor, when you can find that person with that specific need, that's what you're looking for as well, because you've built your product around that specific customer. So for both sides, as a product manager in the tool business, I think it can be really, really tough. You can be exactly those symptoms where you've got lots and lots of people kind of saying, we want this, or we have this problem, and you think you can solve it. Don't do it. Don't go after them, because they're terrible customers.
100%. Last, final one. This was just for fun, but I like to ask, product people are passionate about products. So I like to ask what any product that could be for work, could be just a B2C product you think is cool. Any product out there that you are excited about right now?
I'll just do the latest one, because I get excited about lots and lots of products, but I'll do the latest one because not only am I enjoying it, but I was advising a company and they got so excited, they pulled up the tool and showed me a new feature, and that's Canva. I think it's doing such a wonderful job. It makes life so easy. And there's so much talk about sort of generative AI right now, and so many companies that I think it's going to be an interesting conversation for product people for some time to come. We're just starting to have it, and how you integrate it and what you do. And because it's so easy to integrate, it can be super simple to just throw in a feature. But what they've done is really focused on the need. And so when you think about when you're using Canva, we're not all designers. Well, most of us are using it, but you want those effects. And so if you they thought about how people actually talk. So if I were like, oh, I want that a little more shiny, or I want this to, be more bold, or I want this to be sort of more interesting. That's what they've done in their AI interface. And I think that's so smart because they understood how people actually use their product and the kinds of questions, rather than just sort of this arbitrary addition of a feature. They've been really, really smart about it. So and as I said, literally one of the teams I'm advising, she pulled up a presentation. She's going for this big pitch competition. She pulled it up and she goes, look what I just did. And she was showing me, because she was so excited about it. That's delight. That's a customer who's so excited. They're telling and recommending to someone else and showing them. We didn't need a product demo. I didn't go out to the site. I'm having a user tell me, and I'm another user, and now I want to go back and try it. That to me is customer delight.
That's such a great example. I love Canva. I love that example. And it's, like we've talked a lot about the sort of the big world of powerful B2B tools, and it's easy to get tied up in power features, and Canva has a ton of powerful features, but it's also got that, its identity of knowing like the problem it's solving for who it's solving. And I have a bunch of friends and family who have brick and mortar small businesses, and it's like an indispensable tool for them because they're not going to hire a designer or learn a creative suite or something like that. And what it enables them to do, like for them, really, really feels like magic. And like you said, because of that, they're huge promoters of the product. They're demoing it to other people. It's a great example. And excellent product, excellent example. This has been super fun. I'm so glad you came on the show today. This is awesome conversation. If folks want to get in touch, say hi, learn more, where should we send them?
If you can go to productrebels.com, that's the easiest place. There's a couple of things there that you'll find, the templates. You can link and download them. We also have a talk for larger companies. We can come in and at no cost to you, come and talk about some of these fundamentals and see where you compare. So if you're interested in learning, that would be wonderful.
Amazing. Well, we will we'll include those links in the show notes. Otherwise, Vidya, this was super fun. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Blake. The time just flew by. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.